All right. Hey, good morning or afternoon. I'm not quite sure when this is viewing, but what I was asked to do, what we were asked to do was come and talk about hard conversations that take place in ministry. And so we're going to do that today. And I'm just going to let these guys introduce who they are and what they do at our church.
Yeah, so my name is Andy Peters, and I'm the next generation pastor here. And I'm also the tech director at our Medina campus.
Good.
And my name is Brian. I serve as the executive pastor at one church, and that means a lot of preaching, a lot of stuff in the background, and just a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And we joke, we have a place on our job description that's called Other. Stuff you never signed up for. And so we all kind of fall into that. I'm Rick. I'm the lead pastor at one church, and I've done some coaching with Genesis, and so this just comes under that umbrella. So when I agreed with Pam Brayman, our superintendent, to do this section on hard conversations, can I tell you what happened? We had like 4 things happen that needed a hard conversation within a 2-week period. And I thought, isn't this ironic? God has a sense of humor. So this will be the last time I do a video on hard conversations. But how about if we jump into this? And what I'd like us to do is just individually identify what the issue was that we were dealing with. So Andy, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I dealt with racism at one of our campuses.
Okay. And Brian, how about you? What was yours?
Yeah, it was an issue that came up with just a belief on speaking in tongues, and something that came up in a growth group.
Okay. And the issue I dealt with was somebody who walked into one of the kids' rooms at our Medina campus. They were talking about plagues, and she asked the teacher if she could say something. And what she communicated was that the virus is a plague sent by God because we are killing unborn children. Oh, yeah. So it's like those were some conversations that needed to take place. So that's the issue. So, Andy, let's talk about this part of listening to the person. Like, how was that for you, right?
Yeah, so listening to this person, it was kind of like eye-opening to me because like I've had my ideas in things like that, but I never really saw it from that perspective, right? That I may have overlooked her or not said anything to her. And for her to share her perspective was kind of eye-opening to me. She thought that I was purposely ignoring her for a couple weeks, which was not true at all.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And Brian, what was the issue with the whole tongue thing? What was going on?
So it was something that had come up in a growth group. The leader of that growth group, she's a longtime missionary. And I think I always have I want to be careful when it's a missionary in tongues because I know they've seen things that I've never seen before. So I always want to listen to their perspective. But from her perspective, it was just kind of a natural flow of conversation. They were sharing experiences that they had, and someone in the group had taken that as a teaching rather than this is just what I had experienced. So it was just a miscommunication. The person thought she was teaching a certain way, but she was just talking about things she experienced and things that she saw in her past.
Okay. I think that point where you just said, when we're doing hard conversation, miscommunication can be such a big part of this. We think we heard one thing, but the person was saying another thing. Mine was, it got back to me that a lady had walked in and did the virus thing, that they were talking about plagues. She shared that she thought the plague of the virus was sent by God because we were killing unborn children. That was just her perspective. Now, in our church, we really are eclectic. We're a melting pot of people from different faiths. And so there is that perspective out there that we probably heard, of where this fits in politically or religiously or whatever. And so we knew kind of going in, when I talked to Beth happens to be Andy's wife. And so when I talked to her, it was like, we knew this was a hot spot, and we kind of went in expecting this could be an explosive situation. But when she talked about it, her perspective wasn't the same as maybe what the lead teacher had told us, so it's like, okay, what do we do? We listened real well and, tried to validate, which is reflective listening, validate that we actually heard the other person. I'll probably say this again later, but why do arguments take place? I think arguments take place because nobody's listening. And so people then have to raise their voice to get their point across. So now let's go real fast. So now we go to the end of it, right? You decided to initiate.
Yeah. So I reached out to this person. I think I let 24 hours go by, kind of like just to let things process. And then I reached out to her to set up a meeting within 2 days of that. And so we sat down and we talked a little bit.
Okay, so this one was unique because it was kind of a personal attack almost. So in that situation, did you take somebody with you when you had the conversation?
Yeah, I had another staff member with me.
Okay, so you found me. That's a key piece of this. If we want to diffuse emotion, right, it's often good to take somebody with us if we anticipate, this could be explosive. So yeah, okay. And then what did she say?
Yeah, so basically she just thought that that I was overlooking her, that I purposely didn't say hi to her because she was a different skin color than I was, and there was some electric problems going on stage, and the countdown was on, so I'm high pressure already. And she pulls me aside and asks, "Do you see me sitting here?" I said, "Of course, I see you sitting here." And she's like, "Then why do you purposely not talk to me?" And yeah. I was like shell shocked, right? Like I didn't know how to respond to that. And so I was like, we'll talk about it, but like not 2 minutes before service starts. So we talked, and we felt good about where we landed. So
yeah. And so you shared with her perspective that you were preoccupied with stuff.
Yep.
And then she shared her perspective, which was what?
Which was, it didn't matter that she felt like she was the only one in that room that was overlooked, and she didn't get, spoken to or said hi to.
Wasn't there a part of it where she said to you, "I was having a..."
Yeah. So during our conversation, she's like, she started the conversation with, "I'm really sorry about what happened Sunday. I was having an off week, and it just kind of spilled over, and you were the target."
Okay.
So
that point right there, it's so hard to do when we're doing hard conversations because we're pretty wrapped up in how we felt about that thing, and just having the conversation led to what was going on inside of her and gave her a chance to speak it, right? And then Brian, how about for you? You guys talk on the phone and
so both the person who was in the group and the leader, I know well. They've been in groups that I've led before, so I kind of knew I knew them well enough where I could do it over the phone. And so how it started was I received a phone call from the group member just wanting clarification on what we believe.
Okay.
Because she came from a church background where just red flags were going up when she heard this in the group, and she just wanted clarification from a pastor. And so the first thing I did was ask her permission. Can I bring this up to the group? And now this is something that we would have had to bring up regardless. But I wanted her to know, I'm not going behind your back. This is important to us. So do I have your permission to address this with the group leader? And she was like, yeah, of course, she doesn't want to feel like she's tattletaling or anything like that. And I said, I'll do it in a way where I'm not going to throw you under the bus, I promise. So what I did was I called the group leader, and I just started out by asking, hey, how's your group going? We're about 3 weeks in. How are things going? How's attendance? All that. And she starts explaining how the group's going. And then she brings up the issue herself. She could just sense it, when that conversation was happening. She could sense that one group member was feeling a little awkward. And she actually had wanted to address it prior. She was just not sure how to address it. That's as easy a hard conversation as it gets when she already knows the issue. I didn't have to bring it up. Yeah. So we just were able to talk through it, and I was able to clarify what we believe as a church, what's okay to teach, what's not okay to teach.
Yeah, good.
And just was able to share that group member's perspective. And I did share with her, this was brought up as a concern. But it wasn't personal. It was just this person wanted clarification on what we believe. I thought it warranted having a conversation. And the conversation went great. The group leader reached out to the whole group just to clarify, to apologize. And that group member is now back in the group. And I've talked to both of them since, and they're enjoying the group. And so it was about as easy of a hard conversation as it can be.
Cool. I think what you're kind of hearing here, my perspective on facing problems early on in our marriage and in the church was, if we address the issue, it's going to get worse. And really what the situation is, if we address it, there's two situations where it got better, and so Beth did the initial conversation. She said, this is what a parent said to me about what was said. What did you say? It wasn't exactly like, I still think probably the person that told us was dead on, but the person we were talking to kind of downplayed it and said, this is how it happened. But what that did, because we have people coming to our church from different churches, and some people are what we call DPs. They're difficult people. And if they're a DP at one church, chances are they're going to be a DP at your church. And so we kind of were aware of this situation. And so what I thought that did by addressing it, and she asked another question, that was on her mind, about why we don't have an altar in the church and why we don't encourage people to come forward and give their life to Jesus. And we talked about that, but I told Beth afterwards, we sat in the sanctuary afterwards, I said a couple things. I said, one thing, kudos, good job. You did not act like you were afraid of the situations when you talked in the room, okay? And some of that is because we went together, and the other thing is she's a smart lady. She can do this thing, and so by empowering others so that we're, as the pastor, are not doing all the problem solving. If anything I wanted to model during this is I'm not the only one that solves problems in the church. We have capable leaders and they do it. And I said the other thing that took place today was that we set down a level of accountability. Like, if nothing else, watch what you say, because we will come back and just say, okay, that's not okay here. I don't know if it was okay over there at that church, but it's not okay here. So those are, and then we debriefed about it. We had conversations about it afterward. I just asked you how to go.
Yeah, I think one of the things you had mentioned was how we try to address them early. And I remember early on in ministry, I would psych myself out of the hard conversations because you would play it in your mind, and you always play the worst case scenario in your mind. Like, this person's going to storm out. This person's going to write a letter to my boss. Like, you play out the worst case scenarios. And I've just found that it never ends up being the worst case scenario. Usually, and that's why it's so important to do it in person or at the very least over the phone, because if you do it via email, like, words get taken out of context. But if you do it quickly and you do it in person or over the phone, you hear where they're coming from. You hear the tone of their voice. Yeah. And like I said, it's never played out how it usually plays out in my head for the 24 hours preceding.
That's good, Brian. And it's kind of leading right into what I was going to talk about next. These are just some bullets that are going to pop up on the screen about our process. The first thing is remember God. Like, before each one of those situations, we prayed and just asked God to help us. And I actually, I really believe it. Here's another one. Leaders go first. Leaders go first. Don't say it's not my problem. Leaders go first in the situation. That's why leaders before you, your name, so you make the call. I love what you said about being in person. And if you guys want to jump in here, you can jump in. The next thing is meet quickly. And Brian, you talked about that. There's actually data out there that says if the meeting doesn't take place quickly, there's a less percentage of time that longer it goes on that it can be resolved. The fourth thing is rule your emotions, right? Rule your emotions. And I think one of the ways to do that is we vent to each other. Have someone you trust you can vent to. Tell them how fair it is and tell them the person's a jerk. Well, yeah, and you know what I mean? But do that stuff and how they just misrepresented you. And I was thinking about you, Andy. It's like, you're not prejudiced. So for somebody to come and accuse you of that, that's going to push a whole lot of stuff, And so that's number 4. The fifth thing is validate their perspective. Just do some reflective listening. And here's my favorite phrase for this. If I heard you right, this is what you said, because we have to let them know that we heard them and that we get different perspectives. There are some things we don't move on, but other things, like say the tongues thing, I just think there are groups that they speak in tongues that are believers and they're reaching people for Jesus. We're just different, as far as our approach. The next thing is resolutions. Where do we go from here? If we had a do-over, and I'm big time into do-overs, I'm thankful for God's grace, because you know what? He gives us do-overs, and he gives us a chance to do it in a different way. So if we had do-overs, what would we do? And then just the final thing I have down here is don't meet alone. If it's like you met alone with the person, but you could trust them.
Yeah.
You knew them well, da 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 da. The other ones, we had a certain sense about them that we weren't sure that person would stay in the conversation and explode and go off on a tangent. And so with those things, just ask somebody to go with you. I've had those meetings before where I said, I just want you in the room. You don't have to say a word. But, and these are just the ones we talked about today, are, doctrinal issues on tongue, race, which is big in our culture, virus, those are pretty big things in our culture. We've had hard conversations with staff people. We've had hard conversations with people about the way they dress on the stage, what they post on Facebook, all those type of things, have happened over the course of this. So we hope that this was helpful to you, and we would be glad to help in any way we can. But thanks for taking time to listen. And I'll be praying for you. We'll be praying for you as you walk away from this and name the one thing that you got to have a hard conversation about in your life or in your church. And God bless you. Have a good day.